Jerry has asked me to introduce him because he's a very modest person and he doesn't want to get up and tell you what I'm about to tell you about what an incredible person he is and how involved he has been in water issues in the county for a long time. Jerry has a master's degree in electrical engineering. He was crucially involved with the Santa Cruz City Water Supply Advisory Commission, WASAC, that was formed when the desal plant went belly up, and they decided to have the citizens tell them and weigh in on what needed to be done to really look at solving the water issues in the county. That was called WASAC, and the Santa Cruz City Water Department still abides by those recommendations, and Jerry was very involved in that, as was our other speaker, Mr. McGilvray. Since 2010, Jerry has donated over 8,000 hours pro bono to engineering work and trying to really help come up with a positive solution to the water issues in our county with his wonderful plan, Aquifers, and he's going to tell you about that right now. Please welcome Jerry.
First of all, I really want to stress that we're in this together. How many live in Live Oak? Okay. How many live in Soquel Creek Water District? Okay. How many live in Santa Cruz Water District? All right. It turns out we're intimately intertwined, partly because we buy each other's products, we patronize each other's businesses, and if the water rate goes up in one place, we're going to pay for it, even if we're residents of the other place. We're going to participate in that expense. Also, some water districts have facilities that other districts don't have, and if we are able to pool the facilities, we can go a lot farther. Like, for instance, Santa Cruz has a river, and only takes 7% of the water out of the river, so there's a whole lot left. Soquel Creek Water District draws only from aquifers. The wells are their only source, and now they're sucking the aquifer, critically overdrafted is what they call it. So when we get together, we can do a lot more. We can take water from the river and fill the aquifers with it. And it's very cheap and quick, and we're almost there. There are 7 problems I'll elaborate on. The simple solution I'm advocating tonight, and it is same with Scott McGilvray, is stream water transfers, particularly using in lieu, and I'll explain that in a minute. We've got some terms to define and a map. There's a magic number, 3 billion gallons. I know a lot of you, your eyes glaze over when we talk numbers, and I'm an engineer, so I have to be careful about this. But I'd like you to remember one number, and that's 3 billion gallons, because, well, I'll tell you when we get there. 10 fire hoses. A water district or water supply system is like having 10 fire hoses strung end to end. If you pinch any one of them, you don't get any water out of the end. So we have to make sure that they're a matched set of the throughput rate. And I'll explain exactly where those pinches are and what we can do about it. Water rights and fish habitat. The state of California owns all the surface water effectively, so we need their permission, and that's called a water right. I'll speak of that. And the fisheries regulators can impede our ability to get the water rights we want or configure them how we want. And not just for that reason, but because we like fish and we like a good environment, we want to take care of the fish with the solution that we're proposing. I'll compare alternatives, 3 of them, and I want to tell you about the $130 million letter. Writing one letter could conceivably turn this big ship $130 million to your advantage. So I want to make sure you understand that. Next, please. Problems. There's 7 of them, the big ones. There's irregular rainfall and intermittent drought. On the average, a critically dry year occurs about 1 year in 6 these days, and it might get worse as climate change gets worse in the decades to come. But it's starting already. Aquifer overdraft caused by excessive use of wells, which are Soquel Creek Water District's only source of water at the moment. They pulled water out of the aquifers. And, you know, I went on a speech for about a half hour about aquifer this and aquifer that, and at the end of it, somebody says, "Excuse me, what's an aquifer?" So I thought I'd explain that. It's an underground wet spot, or it usually is wet until it's sucked dry by wells pumping the water out and causing what's called the water table to descend down to become dry. So in turn, that has caused the sea to seep in to the aquifer. Already we've lost some coastal wells, and that's a quintuple whammy. That's a bad thing, because you lose not only the asset, the well, you lose the water that comes out of it, and then you have to go find another source for that water. And that might involve design or capital cost or a whole bunch of things, permitting and things. And you have to come up with a means of transportation to bring that water back to the original site of the lost well. And meanwhile, it might have been 6 years or something, and the ocean has crept in even farther, maybe taken more wells with it. So it's a terrible thing. And so we want to head it off by filling the aquifer with water, which creates a nice storage place for water. And then we can be drought proof, and we can keep the sea pushed back. And that's a good thing, because sea level is rising. By the way, Ron, I want to, where are you, Ron? Duncan? Oh yeah, there you are. I'm honored by your presence, Ron, that you're interested to keep communicating. That's wonderful. Ron is the general manager of Soquel Creek Water District and knows what he's talking about. And if you find that I'm out of whack, please, during the Q&A, let me have it, or let's discuss the particulars. Sea levels rising up to one estimate that's perhaps the most reliable one predicts a 2.3 foot sea level rise by 2070, which is about a half an inch a year, and would start slower and finish faster, but that's what the professional consultants are saying. Now, I know it's a controversial thing, especially in this room, and I'm not going to fight you about it or make anybody wrong, no matter how they feel on the subject, but it is an area of concern that I think belongs on this list. Local fish extinction, especially anadromous salmonids. Anadromous means they live in fresh water and in part of their lives, in ocean water part of their lives. We're talking about salmon, coho, and steelhead, and other species. Another problem is proposals to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on fixes based on questionable info. And to me, recycling human sewage and industrial sewage and hospital sewage to create drinking water is extremely expensive and risky on several levels, and I think we've got a better alternative by a long shot. The last thing is there is dire need for the hundreds of millions of dollars that sewage recycling would cost. And like, for instance, safety, police and fire, housing, roads, education, transportation, physical and mental health, cost of living, and tax relief. Next, please. So, these 7 problems can all be solved by water transfers, taking water out of the river in the winter when it's abundant, so abundant that the fish tend to avoid it often, storing it in Loch Lomond at that time when it's abundant, and then dispensing it from Loch Lomond throughout the rest of the year to all the water districts with wells, so they don't have to use their wells. They can consume what becomes city water, potable water, just like city folks do in Santa Cruz, and they can turn down the wells, and that way Mother Nature's rainfall will fill up the aquifers quickly with rainwater, and at very little expense. This solution was unanimously voted as a preferred method by the Santa Cruz City Council, unanimously, and Water Supply Advisory Committee, unanimously voted. It uses existing infrastructure, the Loch Lomond Reservoir, the Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant for purification, and not to be confused, by the way, with the wastewater treatment plant, which is down near Lagoon by the Santa Cruz Wharf near sea level. This water purification plant is at Graham Hill. It's about 300 feet elevation up Graham Hill Road. And so please don't confuse the two. One treats water to purity and the other one treats sewage. Very different. Very similar names, though, apparently. I mean, unfortunately. This water transfer scheme is proven. It's already up and running. Since December 3rd, when they turned on the valve, water crossed 41st Avenue from Santa Cruz to Soquel, and the meter hit 1,200 gallons per minute, which is, if you run that around the clock, that's 2 million gallons a day, or 730 million gallons a year. That's a lot of water.
What is that number again, Jerry?
It's 2 MGD pipeline capacity, if run 24/7, 365, if you multiply that by 365 days a year, that's 730 million gallons a year. That's the max capacity if you really try a bunch of tricks to use that, what's called the intertie across 41st Avenue.
Maximum capacity of what?
The intertie pipeline itself, from Santa Cruz to Soquel Creek Water District. And to use it to its max, you need to have high pressure in Santa Cruz, low pressure in Soquel, and there's timing issues, and it gets complicated. It's beyond the scope of this talk, but that's the ballpark we're talking about. And so that is about half again more water per year than the Pure Water Soquel project, which Pure Water Soquel, by the way, PWS, is the name of the human sewage recycling scheme. They gave it a new name fairly recently. And,
For the two alternatives?
I'll get to that. Thank you, Terry. It has zero capital cost, partly because it's already up and running. It's zero capital cost because it is up and running. It's upgradable in stages if and when needed, and that's a program we call Aquifer. Aquifer minimum is what's running right now, and Aquifer maximum is expanding 3 pipelines, putting in a well, and getting some more water rights. All right. Low operating and maintenance cost. It's the cost that Santa Cruz has been running forever. And in fact, you can subtract Soquel's cost of pumping water up out of the aquifer, about $200 an acre foot. Ron, I'm sure you know that number a lot better than I do. It's in that ballpark, I guess. And so you can subtract that cost from the cost of shipping water from Santa Cruz to Soquel Creek Water District. And the net is a very low cost, not much more than what's being paid right now, up till now. And the scheme serves the entire region because the water winds up being stored in the aquifer. When Soquel people drink city water in lieu of using their wells, then the aquifer fills up and becomes a storage area to store water and protect us all from drought. It's an ingenious, multi-purpose scheme, first suggested by a venerated consultant with a lot of credentials and jobs around here, which he doesn't want to lose, so he doesn't want his name mentioned, but he's from the get-go, he said, let's do that. Next, please. This is a little bit misaligned. Sorry for the bad typo. I wanted to define aquifer, but I did that already. There's Parissima is the name of the aquifer. That's the coastal one that goes from Live Oak here down to La Selva Beach, mostly under the Soquel Creek Water District. The Santa Margarita aquifer is 3 layers, and it forms a basin, so it can really hold water. And it stretches from Scotts Valley to Felton to Boulder Creek and Lompico area. In lieu is a term that means consuming city water in lieu of well water, as I explained earlier. So you'll hear the word in lieu come up in the language, and that just means drink city water instead of well water and let the aquifer fill up as a consequence. So when the city ships water to Soquel Creek through this intertie, for practical effect, is as if the city had shipped water to fill the aquifer. You understand that? Because of the in lieu, a one for one. Okay, so transfers, I think we discussed that. And PWS, Pure Water Soquel, is the sewage recycling. Next, please. There's 4 ways to fill an aquifer. We can just dump water on the surface of the ground and it'll percolate into the ground. That's called surface spreading. And it doesn't require treated water in particular. Raw water, rainwater is fine. You want it to be as pure as possible for the outcome, but you've certainly heard of septic systems, which take some pretty nasty water and percolate it into the ground, and in the ground filters it, and anaerobic bacteria act on that water, so that if it stays in that environment for different purposes, it's either 60 days or 180 days, it becomes potable. So the big criteria is make sure that water doesn't reach a production well before that number of days is over with. This is a California Department of Health regulation. So surface spreading is extremely cheap. Just take water in the lock, for instance, and dump it in some place around Scotts Valley or one of the quarries or something, and it fills up the Santa Margarita Basin. The Parissima, the aquifer around here, doesn't have good places, very many of them, to do that. So that's mainly for the other aquifer. Rainfall is a second, especially if you don't run wells, because the wells take that rainwater and suck it back out of the aquifer right away. So, and that's what we call in lieu, as I said before. Percolation is to form a pond or a swale and fill that with water, and that'll seep into the ground and engage that filtering and anaerobic bacteria for 60 or 180 days or more. And then there's injection wells. Now that's using a well backwards. That's to shoot water into the ground. And you have to be very careful with those. They require a source of treated water. You can't just inject any water into everybody's aquifer, because there's people in the water district, and then there's private pumpers who are sucking water that they want to drink out of that aquifer. So we need to, anything we put in, we have to make sure is clean. And that's one reason why it becomes expensive, because it's tied to a water treatment plant somewhere along the line. Also, the chemistry must match. If the two chemistries don't match, they could precipitate out things that clog up the system. Dr. Andy Fisher has a map of good places to percolate.
How many are there?
Next slide, please. This is a map of the local area. There are some streams on the north coast, this side of Davenport, from which Santa Cruz gets water. That's the dotted line, it's a pipeline. And also, Santa Cruz gets water from Loch Lomond Reservoir. Now, it has its own 9 square mile watershed, which yields about 750 million gallons a year on average. Varies widely because rainfall varies widely. Santa Cruz takes water out of the river at Tate Street and also at Felton Diversion. Right now, Felton Diversion has a pump that pumps the water up to Loch Lomond to store it, and that's why we pump it up there in the winter and then use it the rest of the year. All the water from all those sources eventually goes to Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant, this shape right here, and from there to the city. And we're proposing that we continue to use this intertie that just fired up in December, so that the same water the city people drink now becomes available to Soquel, so the district can reduce the well pumping and immediately, in fact, as we speak, recharge the aquifers. Next, please. Oh, wait a minute, I should say one more thing. Down here, can you lift this up? These are numbers of sizes of things. Notice the river has almost 30 billion gallons a year average flow. Santa Cruz uses 3 billion, less than 3 billion. Loch Lomond is 3 billion. That's why I wanted you to remember 3 billion. Soquel Creek Water District is about 1.1 to 1.2 billion. And so it's 40% of the size of Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz is the big dog, Soquel's 40% of that. Scotts Valley is only 16% of Santa Cruz, and San Lorenzo Valley is only 16% of Santa Cruz. By the way, this 2.8 is wrong. This is not the flow, it's the size of the loch, almost 3 billion gallons. The flow is about 0.7 of a billion gallons. Next, please. I told you about 3 billion gallons. Okay, fire hoses. The underscores here on items 2, 3, 4, and 7 are things that are pinched. If we widen them, notably number 7, which is that intertie from Santa Cruz to Soquel, that's a cheap expansion. If we widen that, we can really get a lot more water going between the districts in both directions. So that would be beyond the minimum aquifer. This would be aquifer 2, the next expansion to make things go more. Also, the pipeline from Felton to the loch as we speak, is being expanded to 13 million gallons a day. I'd like to see it be at 30, because then even in the worst conditions of climate change, should they come about, it can grab water fast and in very adverse conditions. In Felton, we want to put in a well because a well filters the river water. The water goes from the river down through maybe 10 stories of sediment into the well. So what comes out of the well is somewhat filtered water, and you have a head start in your treatment plant or your surface spreading or whatever else you're going to do with it. Water rights is another thing we've been working on. It turns out Santa Cruz has had water rights that they didn't realize to the water from the North Coast. Since the water rights of Santa Cruz to the North Coast predate 1914 when the law changed, Santa Cruz today has the right to ship that water anywhere, and they chose Soquel to try out this intertie pipeline I described earlier. And so the amount of water that we take out of the North Coast is the amount of water we can legally ship to Soquel from Santa Cruz. And that's about, Scott, I think you know better than me, about 730 or something million gallons a year is what we take out. Right now we're limited by the size of that intertie. And so if we, number 7, if we expand the intertie, we get more. Next. Fisheries and HCP. HCP is Habitat Conservation Plan. It's a deal with the fisheries that will take care of the fish. I believe in doing that. Next, please. Here's a comparison of Aquifer minimum, which Scott will be talking about, the existing flow that we have today. These numbers are approximate, by the way. I haven't had the time. I'm trying to track 12 agencies, groundwater agencies and water districts, and it's just beyond me. You may, Ron, you might find some of this to be approximate. But the big message is on the bottom line, that in every category, the aquifer, both aquifer minimum and aquifer maximum, exceed what Pure Water Soquel is able to do by significant factors. Here's a $55 million margin, $96 million margin, big margins both in difference and in times. There's 4 times better, 5.5 times better. And so one thing I want to talk about is if you build a big expensive thing, you spent $200 million, both capital and operating expense for the 45-year life, you might wind up not using that plant. It happened in Australia and other places where they build this big expensive plant, but river water, stream water is cheaper. So what happens? They build the plant, and so they choose river water. They choose one of the top 2 lines instead of the reverse osmosis fancy schmancy thing, and it only takes a while, 5 or 10 years, says Soquel's consultant, to fill up the aquifer. Then what do? The plant sits maybe not entirely idle, but certainly idle. And certainly, if you talk about cost per gallon, and it produces very few gallons because river water is so much cheaper, then you're paying buku bucks per gallon because of the capital cost loading and the finance cost loading. I don't know their method of finance, what they're going to predict for that, so I had a big margin on finance cost here. Next, please. $130 million letter. If Soquel Creek Water District Board writes a letter to Santa Cruz City Council, who's in charge of the water department in Santa Cruz, copying the Board of Supervisors, saying, we in Soquel will be happy to kick in a few nickels and dimes to implement Aquifer, or the various stages as they become called for. As the climate changes, if it doesn't change, we're fine. We can go with the thing that's running right now. But if the climate does get worse, we can add one more aquifer stage and another aquifer stage. At that time, when the technology is more advanced and when we've built up a fund so we can do pay-go rather than financing. And just the many advantages of doing it when it's time to do it, rather than doing this big hit and then having a plant that sits idle. So if they write a letter to the city saying we'll kick in, pick a number, $30 million if you do XYZ, specified very specifically. For instance, Santa Cruz wants to refurbish the Graham Hill water treatment plant sometime. It's aging. Sometime within the next decade or two, they'll want to do a variety of things to basically turn it over. The whole cost is about $100 million, according to 2 months ago when the chief engineer reported to the water board. So if Soquel, which is 29% of the combined population, paid 29% of the bill, that's $29 million bucks, in the future, to solve the problem completely. Instead of $200 million. And then, by the way, if Soquel goes this route, that denies water being sent back to Santa Cruz in a drought. So Santa Cruz no longer has the aquifer to use for aquifer storage. And in that case, Santa Cruz might have to go with one of these expensive reverse osmosis, recycling sewage kinds of things for another $200 million over cost overrun. And so please, next. Please go to the Water for Santa Cruz County website. By the way, the group is called Water for Santa Cruz County, but the website is Water for Santa Cruz, without the word county.com, and you can find out a whole lot more there. Please show up at agency meetings, groundwater, the water districts, board of directors, city council, Santa Cruz Water Commission, board of supervisors, county water board, and speak. They'll all let you speak for 2 or 3 minutes, as long as, I won't get into their formatting, but if you show up at the beginning of the meeting, look at the agenda, and you can get on there. Letters to the editor, KSCO, I've been on several times and plan to do it some more. And donate. There's even a lawsuit you could get involved in if you want, because the information in the environmental impact report was just not right. There's a by law, California Environmental Quality Act says that the environmental report must not only say what would happen environmentally if they did do the project, but also if they did not do the project. It's called a no project alternative. And in the no project alternative, they didn't include water transfers, which are up and running right now. Now, if that's not an oversight, I don't know what is. So we're trying to get them to redo it. The lawsuit is to that effect. It's to make them redo it and get honest about it. Not that they're dishonest. Let's call it an oversight. I don't want to make anybody wrong or bad. I just want to do the right thing and save us the better part of $500 million, which you can use for tax relief and many other great causes. Thank you very much. Questions?
Okay, hold on. We're going to do a Q&A now. If you'd like to participate in the Q&A, can you come and line up over here and speak in this mic so that we can put you on the video for the presentation?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This microphone moves up and down. You can move it to the level of your mouth. Just speak into the mic. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for coming to speak to our group. We really appreciate it.
Tell me your name, please.
Is it good? Thank you for coming to speak to our group. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And when Becky had a wonderful meeting at Soquel Water, and I think two of the things that I really got out of it was that the transfer and the recharge will give you the same amount of gallons per the same amount of time.
More gallons, actually.
And the problem with the recharge, because I did a little research myself, is that since the urine is coming into the sewage, you cannot filter out chemotherapy byproducts, vaccine byproducts, or prescription or non-prescription drugs. So we will be drinking a lot of drugs.
That seems to me to be a comment rather than a question.
Is
there a question there?
I called a lot of different water companies myself and emailed asking them, and they could not say, yes, we can, with recharging, we can get rid of medications through the recharge because of the urine byproducts.
Long story short, I took a tour of a plant in San Jose, and we have in our group university folk who can really get very deep in this stuff. A lot of what reverse osmosis can filter, this is process. Mm-hmm. It's not bad inherently, but it's not perfect either. Generally, there's two kinds of molecules, and one kind it can filter generally down to 200 daltons. A dalton is a neutron or a proton. A carbon atom is about 12 daltons. That means we're talking about 16 or 14 or so carbon atoms worth of molecule when you load the carbons with hydrogens around them. I don't want to get any more detailed than this, but that's about the size of molecule that can get through. And then if a molecule's like a snake and it can wind its way through, it could be bigger, but that's kind of the general information I'm running with. Then it goes through things like ozone and UV. And UV smashes, splits up the molecules, but then they recombine randomly. And it's that random recombination that I'm worried about myself. And I'm no expert in chemistry. I'm an electrical engineer, Silicon Valley career, corporate management, strategy and design and stuff. Next.
Jerry, I want to compliment the years of effort and brilliant engineering analysis you have done to bring about the Aquifer proposal. I am distressed, angered beyond what I could speak openly in the public, the negligence shown by the Soquel Creek Water Board of Directors, by the City of Santa Cruz, by the regional water authorities, not to embrace the Aquifer solution. Because as you describe, it's hundreds of millions of dollars less costly, impacted on all the ratepayers, and it produces, I'm coming to that, and it produces cleaner water. Given that, sir, what, off the top of your head, is the savings? If my water bill is $3,000 a year, what are my, or $1,000, what are my savings, Aquifer water transfer as you propose it, versus the probably $200 million poop to scoop plan?
I'm glad you asked that, and thank you for the kind words. $95 million capital cost, about $104 million of operating cost over a 45-year life, plus finance charges. We're talking over $200 million, all in for pure water Soquel. The population of Soquel Creek Water District is about 35,000 men, women, 35,000 men, women, and children. So divide that into more than $200 million. That's $6,000 per man, woman, and child. That's the commitment when they sign on the dotted line. That's what goes down. Now that is predicated on that plant is running 24/7, 365, that it doesn't take any vacations. And as I explained earlier, if it does take vacations, then on a per gallon basis, the water's really expensive. It's not worth doing, in my opinion, in either case. But you can't have it both ways. So there's a whammy either way. So if your family has 4 people that live in the district, that's $24,000. I mean, I'm not saying they would actually send your family a bill for 24, but that's the average of how you split the big number up into the 35,000 people. So that's what I'd like to keep your eye on. The other thing is they'll say, oh, we get grant money. Now, grant money sounds good, but it's not manna from heaven. Grant money is taxpayer money. Do you guys like taxes to go up? And wouldn't you rather have the money that taxpayers do pay spent on much better things when there is an alternative to recycling sewage for 200 and some odd million? We could do it for even full Aquifer is $40 million capital cost roughly, and operating cost is much lower than the pure water Soquel. So it's oh, by the way, in 5 or 10 years it'll be done, and so you only have to use infrastructure that can stay alive for 5 or 10 years, and after that you don't even have to build anything bigger. It's pretty much the water in the bank. We can triple. In fact, here's an important thing. Water director of Santa Cruz, previous one, said if I had one more Loch Lomond reservoir, the problem would be solved. That's another 3 billion gallons almost. And then the consultant for WASAC, Water Supply Advisory Committee, heavy-duty mathematician with a computer working in water ongoingly, said that if we put away 3 billion gallons retrievably, we'll be drought-proof for a fairly worst case 8 years in a row drought. And if we put away more than 3 billion gallons, Of course, it's more than 8 years in a row. And so it turns out that the aquifers together have an unfilled capacity of about from 6 to 10 billion gallons, it looks like. So that at least triples Loch Lomond. Okay? So that means really, really drought-proof, and for a long time. And if it comes, say, 45 years from now, we need to resort to some reverse osmosis or something like pure Water Soquel. Okay. But remember, 45 years from now, that's the end of this plant's life. That's when pure Water Soquel is done. And so I'm saying we can make it just fine for a long time before we have to do pure Water Soquel. Next, please. Oh, Ron, I'm so glad you come up.
I've got a couple questions.
He's going to give me a hard time.
Thank you for your presentation. Couple questions. Number one, is the Pure Water Soquel project going to take the water directly to pipe or put it back down in the aquifer to prevent further seawater intrusion?
Well, the version I read,
Put it in the ground or directly to the pipe? That's the question, really.
there's. Okay, you're talking about DPR versus IPR.
I'm talking about Pure Water Soquel project. Does it propose to take the water and put it directly in the ground and prevent further seawater intrusion, or put it in the pipe? It seems confusing the way it's being presented.
Well, I'll tell you what I think, and you tell me if I'm correct. There's something called indirect potable reuse, which is what Pure Water Soquel project design has been up till I last checked, a month or several months ago. That means that the plant will produce pure water, and then it will be injected using injection wells into the aquifer to fill up the aquifer, so that that's the means of filling the aquifer to keep the seawater from poisoning it. Now, there's another way that could be done in principle, and that is having the plant produce water that goes directly to your house. And I think when you said the pipe, that's the pipe.
That's what I mean.
Distribution pipe is the one you were talking about.
Yeah, and that's what they're doing in Texas.
That's called direct potable reuse, and it's illegal in California. Texas has taken a chance in a rural area to do it, but I don't think the people are for it, and certainly it isn't legal yet. However, there's a big lobby on the part of manufacturers of these kinds of plants. In fact, the water districts used to contribute money, may still do, to the lobby that lobbies the state to try to change the law so that you can drink direct water. And so this project may or may not do a Texas two-step to become direct.
Gary's question and answer period is up.
Okay.
Ron has a very short question here. We'll allow that.
This is kind of the capper. How do you reconcile the letter that Rosemary Menard, the water director for the city of Santa Cruz, sent to representatives of Water for Santa Cruz County, the group that you allude to, that said the project, that some form of the project, they do not have sufficient water to solve the seawater intrusion problem for Soquel and the community down there, and if they did, their water still would be more expensive than the project water. So that letter that's been posted, it's public knowledge. How do you reconcile that against what you're saying? Now, this is for the head person for the city of Santa Cruz saying there's not enough water and it would be more expensive. And could you elaborate on, it's not an or, maybe an and?
Thank you. That's a very, very good question. And it sounds damning, but here's what's going on. Soquel is in the proposition being charged for water that Santa Cruz would build facilities to purify. Well, the thing is, those facilities serve the city and not just Soquel. Like, for instance, if Santa Cruz refurbished Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant for $100 million, as I was saying earlier, Soquel would only use 29%, roughly. If you split the cost based on the relative population, 35,000 in Soquel and 95,000 in Santa Cruz, roughly, that's 130,000 people. Soquel would have 35,000 of them, so 29% of the total expense, or $29 million, is really what would be attributable to Soquel if the pipeline the intertie were not a limitation. But the intertie is a limitation, so Soquel can't take their full $29 million worth. So in any case, Soquel actually would be paying a lot less. Nevertheless, these proposals typically say that if we want to do this deal, the cost is $100 million, capital. And it looks to a reader as if it was a bad deal. But what they're doing is something they would do anyway. When Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant is at the end of its life, or the various pieces of it are, they're going to replace the various pieces respectively, either with similar technology or with something that it might even be reverse osmosis. Regardless, they're going to do it anyway, whether Soquel's on board or not. And if Soquel can contribute an extra $29 million, that should be welcome to them. It's something that will make their life easier on something they're going to do anyway. So that's one case of misstating the real data.
Gary?
And the other one is, I'm almost done.
I understand.
Is
Thank
the
you
10
so much.
fire hoses. Time after time, the water director of Santa Cruz has attended meetings in Soquel or other joint meetings and said, look, this system just doesn't work. But the system that she's talking about, either explicitly or by omission, just not mentioning one of the 10 fire hoses, it's pinched. And she doesn't do the optimal thing to unpinch it and then say what it'll cost. She just leaves it pinched, and it doesn't deliver any water. And then she says, oh, bad deal, all this money and no water. You know, that's happened time after time, and we're not fooled by it anymore. You really need to get that 10 fire hose example, and also charging Soquel for water that the city uses most of.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
There. Thank you very much.
Maybe some of these questions will also be answered by our next speaker, who is Scott McGilvray. He is a person who has been highly involved in these things for quite a while. Spent 10 years as a landscape industry, got much involved in water conservation and water politics. Appointed in 1990 by Governor Deukmejian to serve on a 14-member task force to draft water conservation legislation for California. He thrived in the large-scale overview of water supply and demand and the arcane world of water politics. In 2008, he founded Water Aware, a consulting firm that specializes in economic analysis and water management studies. Water Aware works for property owners and water districts. Been involved with desal alternatives since 2002 and has made 2 documentary films on Santa Cruz water. Scott has attended water hearings and testified often before water commissions at the state and local levels. We're going to have a very short video, about 3 minutes, and then Scott will be up with us. Thank you.
Four years ago, we wondered why we needed a desalination plant when we live in a redwood rainforest. We asked, we resisted, we searched, and now we have found. The Santa Cruz Water Supply Advisory Committee spent 18 months and $2 million to sort through the Santa Cruz water supply question. The decision was unanimous. Rely on winter harvest of the San Lorenzo River, in lieu transfers with other water districts, and aquifer storage. There is no water supply problem in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz has abundant winter water flow to refill the Loch Lomond Reservoir, with plenty to spare to recharge the aquifers. This past winter, we had a good rain year. Abundant rain fell in the watershed. The dam filled in March, and by March 13th it was flowing over the spillway, and the spillway continued to overflow well into May. In addition to filling Loch Lomond, over 700 billion gallons could have been harvested from the San Lorenzo for use and aquifer replenishment. What about a bad rain year? Well, we had a very bad winter the year before, only half the normal rainfall, and a short rainy season. But even with the low rainfall, the San Lorenzo and its watershed provided 650 million gallons to refill Loch Lomond, and another 450 million gallons flowed out to sea that Santa Cruz had the rights to harvest. So even in a bad rainfall year, Santa Cruz does not have a water supply problem. Soquel Creek Water District, on the other hand, has an urgent water supply problem. The district was formed in 1961, too late for water rights on its streams. So the district is dependent upon groundwater and wells. This problem is year-round and every year. This year, while Santa Cruz has no water rationing, Soquel Creek is again in a Stage 3 drought emergency. But there's good news in this. The excess capacity created by the overdrafting is 9 billion gallons. That is a lot of storage. So the needs match. Santa Cruz has surplus water and no place to store it. Soquel Creek has no reliable water supply, but a huge aquifer with excess capacity. Santa Cruz has water from several sources. North Coast stream water has been harvested since the 1800s, so the water rights are pre-1914. Pre-1914 water can change place of use without any permit change required. That water can be transferred to Soquel Creek as long as the quantity transferred does not exceed the quantity harvested. This could be our future. We can end the water supply and storage crises by taking the excess winter runoff in Santa Cruz and use the excess storage available in the aquifers to build drought protection for both districts. In a few years, we can look back and say, we have done something we can be proud of. We have found and secured the water for our children and our grandchildren. Okay. That's okay? Okay. Well, that wasn't a bad little 3-minute radio show. It's really the story. We have water that Santa Cruz has and has had rights to for hundreds of years, for over 100 years, that goes out to sea, and Soquel Creek has storage. If we put the two together, the problem is solved. If you'd like to see that movie, go to the Water for Santa Cruz website, and the movie's right there. The movie was made in January of 2016. You might have noticed a statement that the spillway at Loch Lomond was overflowing as of March the 3rd of that year. This year it overflowed on February 4th. So we have water. We also have the intertie between Soquel Creek and Santa Cruz that opened on the 3rd of December. And that will carry the water into Soquel Creek right now if we wish it to. We also have rights to the water because Santa Cruz has water that comes from the North Coast, and that is pre-1914 water right water, and Santa Cruz can send that water anywhere it wishes. So there are no legal impediments or permit impediments to transferring the water. We've been here for quite a while. Jerry was used a little more than 30 minutes, and I'd like to try to help bring back the time because I think answering some of the questions that were asked is probably the best thing that we can do. Mr. Duncan asked the question, how can you make these claims when the water department director of Santa Cruz says there's not enough water? Well, the answer is because she's wrong.
She's lying.
No, I'm not saying she's lying.
I'll say she's lying.
Well, that's Terry. You all know Terry. We all know Terry. Well, I do know the facts, and I have studied this water for 7.5 years. My background is economics, and I was involved at the state level by Governor Duke Majan in 1990, appointed to a task force to deal with state water policy. So I've been at it a while. I understand the definitions. And I can tell you that having followed this path, as I said in the movie, we wondered, we asked, and we looked, there is sufficient water. And we will probably have to have this debate at the city level. Although I really think in the end that Rosemary will probably rather soon tell us that there is, oh, here's water for me, thank you. That's great. That Santa Cruz water demand is actually less than they thought it was by 400 or 500 million gallons. So the situation regarding the availability of water is really not going to be an issue. The second part of that is, what about the cost? Well, that's a little bit more difficult to sort out, but I want to start by making it clear there's a distinction between cost and price. And in our hurried world, we often convert the price that somebody wants to charge for something for the cost that we have to pay for it. Now, with that in mind, what we want to focus upon is what is the cost of producing this additional water that's flowing down the river when we have a water treatment plant that has surplus capacity, when we have a river that has surplus water availability, and we have infrastructure in place that will transfer that water that is already in place. The cost of producing that extra water is only the cost of pumping it from the river up to the water treatment plant, which is already operating, fully staffed, and increasing the throughput of that water treatment plant in the wintertime from 6 million gallons a day to 7.5 million gallons a day. It doesn't require one more employee. It requires some more chemicals to treat it, chlorine. It requires some energy to pump it from the Tate Street intake. The Tate Street intake is essentially within 200 yards of the tannery, so it's low. And it has to be lifted 300 feet to get to the Graham Mill Water Treatment Plant. Everything else is already paid for. The water bills are being sent. The public relations is being done. The accounting is being done. So what this is called, it's the marginal cost. And the marginal cost to produce another acre-foot of water is somewhere between $160 and $200. That's true in Santa Cruz. It's also true in Soquel Creek because they've already got their pipes, they've got their administration, they've got their meter readers. We're just talking about pumping water out of the ground, treating it with chlorine, and going it through the pipes by gravity where it's going. So the cost of that water is very, very low. And to somehow construct a sentence where you say that it costs more than a $200 million water treatment plant and the cost of reverse osmosis at 780 pounds per square inch is preposterous. I haven't answered Rosemary Menard's letter accusing Water for Santa Cruz of deliberately misrepresenting the water facts because I don't want to get into an email debate. I'm going to lose it. As you've seen, the director of the Soquel Creek Water District takes the letter, blows it up 4 or 5 times, marks it with red ink, and runs around town saying, well, how can you say that the cost is less? Well, I can say that the cost is less because the cost is less. You know, I'm an economist. I have a master's degree in business administration. There are certain principles of accounting, and when you consider that the system is in existence and it's operating and the water is surplus, and the capacity is surplus, and the infrastructure has extra room in it, you cannot charge for those when you calculate the cost. It's fundamental economics. It's in the textbooks. So I guess what I'd like to leave you with is to remember that these institutions wanted us 4 years ago or 5 years ago to build a desalination plant. And it turned out that the public was right, and people like Rick Longinati, and with a little bit of help from myself, because I worked on the economics part of it, have managed to demonstrate beyond any further scrutiny that was a ridiculous idea. And so when you hear statements and guarantees that this is going to cost more than pure Water Soquel, take them with a grain of, I can't say salt, is that a bad pun? Take them with a grain of salt. I really, this is it's very, very clear. It doesn't need to be elaborated upon. So I'd like to reserve the rest of the time for anyone who has any questions, and thank you very much for the attention. I'm really delighted to see this many people care and are willing to come out on a nighttime. Thank you.
Scott, thank you so much. We'll have our young lady Becky here shortly, and then we'll have question and answer after that.
A joint question and answer.
Joint question and answer between you and Becky. Thank you. Becky's on her way up here now. You got to thank her for her hard work. She is spending tremendous amounts of time to make this happen. Thank you, Becky.
Can you hear me? All right, thank you. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I'm a resident of rural Aptos. I am not a customer of Soquel Creek Water District, but my family and my community depends on the water that is in the same basin that Soquel Creek Water District pumps from.
And replenish our
So I am
overdrafted groundwater
concerned,
basin.
and I've been watching what's going on. Yes, let's do that. I'd like to first thank my daughter, Bria, who worked very hard to put on a slideshow, and there were some technical difficulties, so her wonderful work's not going to be seen, but there is a video from actually the Soquel Creek Water District site that, Bruce, do you want to play that video?
No, but we can't do the slideshow. We just have to plug her computer into the connection.
Okay.
After this.
Well, let's watch this, because I do think it, in all fairness, especially with Mr. Duncan here, it's fair that you see what Soquel Creek Water District has put together for people to see on their website.
Pure Water Soquel, a proposed project that could restore and replenish our overdrafted groundwater basin. When we use too much of our groundwater, the seawater gets in and contaminates the freshwater, making it unusable for our community. As part of our community water plan, which also includes conservation and groundwater management, we're seeking new water supplies to address our groundwater challenges. Pure Water Soquel would pump clean water into the groundwater basin to protect it from seawater intrusion and preserve it as our sole source of drinking water, helping provide long-term sustainability of our community's water supply. There are several options for the source water needed to replenish our groundwater basin. Small portions could come from rivers or other surface water, or from a desalination plant in Moss Landing. The district is also exploring replenishing the groundwater basin with storm water, as well as with purified recycled water, which is put through additional filtering, cleaning, and disinfecting stages, transforming it into advanced purified water. This water will meet or exceed state and federal drinking water standards. Increasingly, communities throughout the world are supplementing their drinking water supplies with advanced purified water, including Orange County in California and the city of Perth in Australia. Their multi-stage filtering and purification technologies are proven, dependable, and highly regulated. And those same technologies can work here. The district could recycle treated water from the Santa Cruz wastewater treatment facility that's currently disposed of into the ocean. Then, prior to pumping it into the groundwater basin, that leading-edge technology would be used to further treat the water at a new water purification facility. The district's proposed new facility would not handle raw wastewater. Only treated water goes into the advanced water purification facility. The district is exploring several possible locations for this facility, which would be small-scale and designed to be a good fit with its surroundings. We thank the community for continuing to participate, evaluate, and be informed about this state-of-the-art effort to sustain our local water supply. Working together, we can protect our quality of life and meet the needs of families, businesses, and facilities, which all depend on a safe and reliable water supply, for today and for the future.
Well, I appreciate the effort that the district puts forth to educate their customers, but I'm glad that you're here tonight to hear the other side of the story. I think Jerry Paul and Scott McGilvray have done a great job of talking about what else is out there. The video says that there are places around the world that are using this technology, and that is true because they don't have any other choice. That's not the case here in Santa Cruz County, as you've heard from our previous two speakers. Oh, excellent. This is my daughter, Bria, and she has spent a lot of time putting together the slide presentation to help me keep on track here. Thank you, Bria, and thank you, Bruce. So the Pure Water Soquel project is actually the district made its decision in 2014 to call this their preferred project. They talk about other alternatives, other things they're doing, but they made the decision in 2014 that this is what they were going to do. And that has been very clear in their actions, very clear in their expenditures of resources, pursuing grants to further this project, but not pursuing any of the others, especially the river water transfers, with the equal zeal that they are for this project, which has really puzzled many. Because why would you want to do this kind of expensive, very risky project when there are alternatives that may not make it necessary? So I want to respond a little bit to Mr. Duncan's letter and also second what Mr. McGilvray said, that Santa Cruz City Water Director Rosemary Menard did say in her response to the draft environmental impact report for the Pure Water Soquel project, and I have this book that you see here, this is what's called the response to comments on the draft environmental impact report. It's over 700 pages. And the Water District allowed the public 10 days to review and comment on this document. And that is one of the issues in the legal action that I'm bringing against the district. They have not honored the CEQA process. Thank you. I just want to speak to that issue a bit, that the Water for Santa Cruz people really did want to bring this legal action too. As what's called an unincorporated association, a group of people, they could not represent themselves. They have to have an attorney do it. They interviewed, Mr. McGilvray spent a lot of his own money and time and interviewed 2 attorneys and were given the price tag of $80,000 to $100,000 to do this. And that's a lot of money. So Water for Santa Cruz was going to just say, darn. But I couldn't do that. So I took a deep breath and did some crying and decided that I care too much about my community, and I have learned too much by attending almost all of the board meetings. And I read the draft EIR, and it was such a scam, such a false-hearted measure that I had to do something. So I went to the county law library, and those people helped me. And so I was able to file with the good help of Jerry Paul, who served the papers. I couldn't do it myself. And so I am taking this action improper because I care. And now I had to research that a bit because there's this thing called legal standing, and because I'm not a district customer, I could easily, I felt, be shot out of the water because I don't have legal standing. But luckily in CEQA law, there is the ability for members of the public to take what's called beneficial public standing and do their due duty as a citizen. So that's what I've done. And I haven't been thrown out of the water yet, so here we go. But I wanted to tell you, read this to you from the draft, the comment from Rosemary Menard. The city has the following comments, and she submitted many pages as an agency with concerns about the draft environmental impact report for this, and along with other agency commenters, including key people like John Ricker from the County of Santa Cruz Water Resources Department, Kent Adler from the County Sanitation Department. These people submitted some very key concerns, and the response from the agency was basically blowing them off. Here's what Rosemary Menard said, and I want to say this because it really speaks to what Mr. Duncan said. Section 7 of the draft EIR describes alternative 2, reduced project with, that means making Pure Water Soquel project smaller, with treated surface water purchase, and states that this alternative requires the guarantee that water would be available to the district yearly and not just during drought years. An analysis should be completed that confirms the need to receive 300 acre-feet each year, as opposed to a potentially varied regime of water transfers that achieve the same supply reliability objectives. This is what I want you to hear. The city is strongly committed to the success of a project that improves water reliability for the city, other agencies, and has beneficial impacts to the basin, and without evidence to the contrary, believes a modified operational approach may be equally successful. So the city is behind solving this problem. To me, the crux of the problem here is the mistrust of Soquel Creek Water District, having come out of the rather unfortunate experience in 2013 of the desal plant being dropped abruptly without consultation. Soquel Creek Water District had partnered with the city of Santa Cruz to do this desal, and when Rick Longinati and a bunch of other great citizens got together enough qualified signatures to put the issue to the ballot, to let the people decide what they wanted. They got enough to do that, and when that happens, the decision-making body, and in this case it was Santa Cruz City Council, has the option of either putting the measure on the ballot or taking some other action, dropping it. And the Santa Cruz City Council decided to drop it. The problem is they didn't discuss that with Soquel Creek Water District first. And apparently it was quite a surprise to the district. Both agencies had spent millions of dollars.
Wasted millions.
So here we are again, and one would think that Soquel Creek would have learned from that unfortunate experience about rushing forward on a project, spending millions of dollars, and not really talking with the people. And again, I want to bring to you this point that this project, the Pure Water Soquel project, would pump the treated, I call it what it is. It's treated sewage, effluent, treated sewage water. It's treated, yes, but there are things that cannot be completely removed. Many of them are pharmaceuticals. There are disinfection byproducts, the nitrosamines, it's called NDMA, that's carcinogenic, and the district's own engineering evaluations of the wastewater stream in Santa Cruz City have shown them that they cannot get it all out. They can get it down to low levels, but I want to tell you that there are no drinking water standards for pharmaceuticals. So when you hear the claim that the water would be treated to drinking water standards and injected into the ground, that is true, but what they're not saying is that not everything is regulated. And what they're not telling you is that maybe we can go to the next slide. What they're not telling you is that it's really sewage is reactive soup. Now, thanks to Bria and thanks to the Soquel Creek Water District website, you can get a lot of information on their website. They do have a lot of information, as does the waterforsantacruz.com website. But this is the map, basically, of what is proposed. The waste secondary treated sewage effluent would come from the Santa Cruz City Waste Treatment Plant on Bay Street through 11 miles of pipeline, and they haven't even decided where it would go, which adds more folly to an environmental impact report, saying that it will have no significant impact to do all of this. There would be 18 stream crossings, so this pipe bringing treated sewage water, as well as the return pipe bringing back what's called the brine, the really nasty gunk that's taken out, and would be sent back to the wastewater treatment plant and pumped out to the bay. So don't be fooled. The contaminant level is not going to be reduced, it's going to be concentrated. It would be blended with water and sent out to the bay, but the overall contaminant level is not going to be reduced going out into the bay. So then it would follow somewhere, and then the district has identified, well, they pretty much have decided that the treatment plant would be put at property that is not in their district. It would be at the piece of land on the Soquel Avenue frontage road across from the Sheriff's Center. And it's called the Lamb property. Maybe you've seen it. There's this really decrepit old house there, and Davy Tree stores their equipment there. That's where they want to put their treatment plant. And then from there, the advanced purified water would be sent to their injection sites, these black triangles over here. Now, you can see one of those in progress under construction now at Twin Lakes Baptist Church. The district actually started the project before the EIR was done. And they started that project and have made some pretty amazing financial agreements with Twin Lakes Baptist Church, paying them $800 a month for rent while they're developing this well for 3 years. If it does work out that it could be used for an injection well for the project, they have already signed a 50-year agreement with them to give them 3.5 acre-feet of a year of water to water their athletic fields, and also to waive the water demand offsets for a 1,600 square foot employee housing at the site. So it's a good deal for the church, and I really have to wonder why the district pursued this site instead of the Cabrillo College site just across the way, which was also supposed to be evaluated. That might be something for consideration. So the 3 sites of injection sites that the district did decide on is the Twin Lakes Church and Willowbrook. There's a little piece of land that I think the district does own next to the tennis courts, next to Willowbrook County Park. And then on the other side of the freeway, there's a little postage stamp of land on Monterey Avenue, Kennedy Drive, right next to Shoreline Church. It's completely surrounded by 2-story houses. Now there will be pumps running at these injection sites. They would also have to be backwashed and cleaned. So there would be effluent coming out, which could be either put into the sanitary sewer, which the county, one of the comments was that it's already over capacity, or it could be diluted and put into just the creeks. Now, one of the issues in the lawsuit is that Fish and Game did not even comment on this draft EIR. There are 0 comments on the draft environmental impact report from Fish and Wildlife. By CEQA law, that agency is required to submit comment and to consult with the agency as the draft EIR is created. And that is because the any mitigations regarding stream and plant and wildlife must be enforceable, and therefore that is incumbent upon Fish and Wildlife to develop or assist with, consult with the agency to develop those. But there is absolutely no evidence at all of Fish and Wildlife even being involved in this process. And that's one of the tenets of the legal action I'm bringing. Does anybody have any questions while we've got this map up? It's 11 miles of pipeline, so from it would be double pipeline, because you don't want to mix the two things, and you also don't want to have them following the same corridors that drinking water supply lines follow either. So that was not discussed in the EIR either, the draft EIR. There is a tremendous amount of energy increase demand for this. The reverse osmosis pumps are what the Corolla engineers, the district zone engineers, have called energy hogs. Now, why would you want to do that when you don't have to, when the water comes from the north and the pipelines are already in? This project is anticipated to take 2 to 3 years to construct. I will tell you that the district moved forward their estimated construction completion date to 2022 only to qualify for some state and federal grants who had that completion date as a requirement to get the grant. The district hired an economist from UCSC, Mr. Brent Haddad, who wrote a very convincing cost-benefit analysis of the project to submit with the grant application. And on the very first page, it states there is no alternative to this project. But we know that, we've heard that. And unfortunately, the cost-benefit analysis was peer-reviewed by the hydrologist that the district has hired to do all the modeling work, because it was stated in some of the literature that he has a minor in economics. So the whole thing, I think, is being rushed through unnecessarily and with not very good documentation or thought. Now, I have seen the results of what happens to that. But let's go to the next slide that Bria's made. Because this is what it really is. Sewage is chemical soup. And what has been well documented is that there are reactions, chemical reactions that happen with sewage. And it is impossible to test for everything because you don't even know what's there. So the sample that, the grab samples that Corolla Engineering took to analyze the portfolio of contaminants in our county's sewage, and by the way, sewage from La Selva Beach gets pumped all the way to Santa Cruz City. It's rather an amazing little pipeline system with pumps all along the way. But what the samples that were taken that were just basically some grab samples. They did it over, I think, a course of a month, 4 and then 4, but it was rather scanty information. And there are things that they can't get out. There are things they don't even know that are there, that were not even reported. So it bothers me that that they want to inject this into our water supply. And I will tell you that another concerning thing regarding the Twin Lakes Church project is I've been watching it, and when they were pumping the water out, it was the groundwater, and it was warm. Now, if you have an understanding of biological processes, bacteria and things propagate much more quickly with warmer temperatures. So that concerns me. And we also have to keep in mind that Even the district was warned in 2017 by a panel of National Water Reuse Institute experts that, and you can see that video on their website. It was in September of 2017. They were warned by the experts that, first of all, the Pure Water Soquel is considered a relatively small plant. And so the cost-benefit analysis may, they might want to look at that. But also, I clearly remember one of the experts saying, this project will depend on everything working perfectly 100% of the time. Now, how often does that happen? And we only have to look across the bay to about a year ago when a similarly very high-tech, built-in redundancy warnings and all of that system at One Water sewage treatment plant in Seaside malfunctioned, but nobody knew. Nobody was paying attention. It was all automatic. It's all, and it ended up pumping 4.9 million gallons of raw sewage into the bay before anybody figured out what had happened. I don't want to trust that technology and having to depend that it works perfectly 100% of the time. There is always human error. There's always technological failures, and it's too risky to the entire Mid-County area to be pumping a chemistry set into the aquifer. Next slide, please, Bria. Thank you. She's helping me move along. And Bria, bless her heart, wanted to throw in some humor because this is all very serious stuff, and she hears me vex over it a lot. And so what we really have to do is look at, in a nutshell, this is a very expensive project, $90 million to $135 million construction costs. If you add in the debt burden, that will be over $200 million. The district has already raised, just recently, their customers' rates just to pay for this project. They didn't make that clear, and I really have a problem with that. I think it was a violation, but that has to be brought by a ratepayer. But it is to fund this project, even if they do get the $50 million grant from the state and the $20 million grant from the federal. There's still unfunded liability, and both of those grants are what are called reimbursement grants. So they would not get, the district would not be refunded the money to build this project and have it up and running by 2022 for possibly another 8 to 10 years after it's up and running. That's irresponsible, I think, when it isn't needed. Next slide, please. So is there another way? I think we've heard about that tonight. Let's have the next slide, please. So what can you do? Well, as Jerry and Scott have said, we all have to get involved. We all have to stand up. We all have to go to these meetings. We all have to tell them what we want and tell them that this is unacceptable. I'm going to be honest and say that I think that the Soquel Creek Water District Board is not really interested in hearing what the people have to say. And it's disappointing, it's frustrating. A lot of people get angry and they don't come back. A lot of people get angry and they fill the room. And the district hires security guards to intimidate people.
I find it interesting that he's videoing your talk, but not the other two guys.
Oh, well, that's all right. You can video, it's all right. This is a public place, and I respect your, yeah. Yeah. So I want to bring to, I'm over time too here, and I'm sorry, but I think what it may have to happen is a similar pathway to what happened with the desal. I think we may have to look at getting together a citizen initiative and getting this on the ballot. The tricky thing, and I've been asking for this from the district all along, as well as the Mid-County Groundwater Agency, which is the agency that has come together of all these different water users that has to come up with a plan by next year to say that they can sustain the basin user levels. And no one would talk with me about it. They'd keep finger pointing. And I have been talking with LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission. I have been talking with Gail Pellerin at County Election Department, and it's a tricky thing because this project is a district project, so it would have to most likely be a citizens initiative from within the district, but this project would certainly affect many people outside of the district. So we'll have to be doing a little bit of work on that, but I sincerely think that that's what's going to have to happen. But I do encourage you to write letters to the editor. I do encourage you to write letters to Soquel Creek Water District Board, to Santa Cruz City Water Department, to the newspapers, because we have to be vocal about this. This is a very serious, in my opinion, a very serious threat to the health and safety and to the environment of all of this area. The positions that I have taken in the, what I'm filing for is what's called a petition for writ of mandate. I'm not asking them for money. I'm asking them to follow the law. And I have the assistance and guidance of a very good mentor, Mr. John Cole, who is a ratepayer. And I was at the district meeting when he brought many discrepancies and illegalities in the district's rate structuring to their attention and asked them to take a look at it, and they blew him off. They really did. It was an insult, the way he was treated after he had brought to them some very valid concerns. And it turned out he also did his own legal work pro per, and he won. And that is why, yes, he's, yes. It should have been retroactive, and there should have been many other things that the judge, Judge Paul Burdick, sided with Mr. Cole on in terms of illegalities of the rate. But the judge did not make the adjustments to the bills retroactive. He made it effective July 1 of 2018, and that's why some of you maybe got a $3 check or something like that with no explanation from the district. The district has been very silent on this, but Mr. Cole, he's my hero, and he's helping me with this very monstrous document called the Administrative Record, which is a collection of every single action, decision, report, analysis, communication that has gone from basically 2014, when the district decided that this was their preferred project, contrary to what they have said all along, that, oh no, we won't make any decision until the EIR is done. That's just false. But every single thing has to go into this administrative record, and he's helping me do it. So I'm really grateful to him. Next slide. So I've taken a really long time, but I just want to quickly go through some of the things that I am suing them for. And it's the only way that you can stop an action regarding an environmental impact report that any agency takes. And they did not analyze the no project alternative, which would have included the agreements that are already made and in progress. They did not respond to key public agencies, like I've told you here, with the city, the county. It was just basically circular reasoning, referring them back to the draft EIR, back to the point that the agency made the comment that this is insufficient information. There was no trustee agency comment. The Fish and Wildlife people did not comment. Many other agencies like the Coastal Commission, state parks, did not comment. There was a lack of respect for public input. Many people asked for more time than 10 days. In December, without any notification that this document was coming out. They had been told in their meeting that it would be out the first of the year, and here it came 2 days later after it was announced it would be out the first of the year in the beginning of December, when we are all very busy, and we asked for extra time. We asked for extra time on the draft environmental impact report, which is even bigger than this, and the answer was no. Mr. Duncan refused, and it was Mr. Duncan's decision to refuse further public input. The Live Oak area was not notified when the project changed, when the district got so much flack from the people that live right around the district headquarters, where the district bought land in 2016 for this project. Now, don't tell me that's not thinking ahead and having a prejudicial abuse of power, but they bought this land, they demolished 2 historic structures and kicked out Section 8 housing tenants, and it's just been sitting there. So they got so much resistance from the people in that area that they found another site, the Chanticleer site, and decided, oh, we'll look at that. So they changed the project. But they didn't notify those people in the Live Oak area. Those people are Santa Cruz City Water District customers, not from Soquel Creek. They would have no reason to be checking website information. But they have been very upset and only have been coming to meetings since the board approved the project and certified the EIR on December 18th. Bria, you have a question? Well, it's kind of a cute picture. Better they can look at him than me. Thank you, sweetie. So that's one, and so there was also new information that was given out at the December 18th hearing by one of the directors. Director Lather has worked for the county sanitation department and had information and concerns about the history of the use of that Chanticleer site. That had never been discussed at any of the meetings. It was not brought out in the draft EIR. And so by law, that is significant information, and the whole thing should have stopped, and that information should have been at least discussed or further evaluated, but it was not. Director Lather didn't even know what this document was. And you can see that on video. She, when people were getting up and testifying, saying they really needed more time than 10 days to read the document, she clearly had it confused with the draft environmental impact report that had been made available at libraries. And she referenced that and sort of scoffed at people for asking more time. It had to be pointed out to her at that meeting that, no, what they're talking about is this document. And she asked how many pages it was. And when they told her, she just said, oh. Now, that's not owning the information. And by CEQA law, the decision-making agency, which is the board of directors of the water district, must own this information and say that it agrees with everything that they stand for, and she had not even read it. That should have made the other directors and the agency stop. That's okay. That will help me move along. Prejudicial abuse of discretionary power. The district has been consistently spending thousands and thousands of dollars every month on consultants. They got a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. contract for $45,000 a year to help them get grants for this project. They have been flying that lobbyist out here on a monthly basis, and I was able to, through Public Records Act requests, which you can all do, get information, and I found that they had been meeting monthly with the Pure Water Soquel team at an exclusive hotel in San Jose, talking about how they're going to move this across. And that's the ratepayers' money that's paying for all of that. They entered into these expensive land use agreements with Twin Lakes Church. As I've told you before, $800 a month rent for 3 years and possibly a 50-year lease, giving them free 3.5 acre feet a year of water to water their fields and waiving a water demand offset fee for staff housing on site. And they continue to negotiate with the trustee of Arthur Lamb's estate for that property at Chanticleer. Most agencies, when legal action is filed against them, they stop, because to continue is a risky thing. But that's not what's happening here. The district is very aggressively pursuing this project, and I have twice gone for before ex parte with Judge Gallagher to try to get a temporary restraining order to get them to stop, and that was not awarded because it was not deemed an emergency. One of the second restraining order was to try to get them to stop negotiating for purchase of this Lamb property, because if they do own the property when the judge eventually hears things, which is now scheduled for the beginning of June, it will be to their advantage that they own the property. And the judge did not understand that I was trying to make that point. It's called a doctrine of mootness. The district went ahead and raised their rates. They had been consulting with Raftellus, a rate increase consultant, very expensive, to help them craft their current rate increase, structured solely to fund the Pure Water Soquel project. And you can look at the November 6th board meeting and see that, when the board decided to adopt a rate structure based on the premise that there would be no grants received, so that if they do get the grants, it will be easier to let their ratepayers have a break instead of trying to go back and get more money from them. I think I want to wrap it up here, but if you have any questions, I'd like to team up with Scott McGilvray. I really want to thank Scott. He has really been the leader in this, bringing information and working to get the historic water use and just facts that cannot be denied. And, you know, even the draft EIR says that the groundwater levels in the project area have recovered. Mr. Duncan was quoted in a Santa Cruz Sentinel article about a year ago saying that the groundwater levels are at historic highs. So please explain to me why it is still thought that this very expensive, very risky, very environmentally damaging project could be a solution or even needed. And so I urge you all to speak out and ask a lot of questions. Sunday there will be a open fence tour of the Twin Lakes Church injection well site. You can go on the Soquel Creek Water District website and sign up for one of their 15-minute tours and talk with them and just see what they have to say. Thank you very much.
That was fabulous. Thank you. I'd like to invite Jerry Paul up here also. Jerry, if you have a minute, you can join us also.
You didn't go to your wife's concert.
No, Jerry, come on up.
Oh, yes,
and
please.
also, thank you everybody for staying. These are amazing presentations and amazing community service these folks are doing.
Is there a way for us to get publicly a list of every single person's salary, retirement package, and pension?
The lady's question is asking about the compensation, salary packages, retirement packages. I presume you mean the staff of the Soquel Creek Water District. Is that correct? Yeah, and the answer is you can file a public information request under California law.
Well, you don't even actually have to do that to get that information. You can go on Transparent California, and you can type in the district name and then look at all of the salaries and benefits and everything for staff for the last, I think, 5 years. You can do that for state and county and city officials as well. Transparent California.
The prior gentleman asked about where the money goes. Well, the money goes, if it's $100 million, to the bond sellers who sell the bonds. And we found out that Goldman Sachs San Francisco affiliate was, and I don't mind saying, bribing people in Santa Cruz government to help push, for example, the Cabrillo bonds that were going to cost all of us $300 million, completely unjustified. But Goldman Sachs was going to walk away with $31 million in fees. Similar would be here. So if $100 million in bonds is sold for Soquel Creek Water District, because obviously it's going to have a high rating, you're going to pay for your water, a underwriter like Goldman Sachs would be making 10 to 20% perhaps, but minimum. Anyway, millions of dollars. In addition, the contractors involved, they're all lined up. And the people who sell the purported cleansing equipment for the water, they're in highly profitable business. So that's where the money goes. And it's theft, future theft, from 15,000 water households in Soquel Creek, frankly. My question is, I've analyzed this for years, and the solution, the big picture solution, I'd like to see if Becky and he agree. The big picture solution is we have these polyglot water districts all over the county and the region. They should have been consolidated. One consolidation that was obvious was for Santa Cruz City Water and Soquel Creek to merge. They're adjacent. And that was put to LAFCO as a suggestion, asking LAFCO to consider it. John Leopold and Zach Friend especially.
Is this a question?
I'm asking, yes. There's a preamble.
Yes.
Torpedoed LAFCO's consideration of Becky's proposal some months ago to consider consolidation. Now that consolidation, Mr. Economist, would reduce the overhead cost for Soquel Creek by perhaps 70%. It would also consolidate the water supplies, and it would also reflect the fact that the state government should probably take all of this over regionally, because we cannot, as we see here with the Soquel Creek Board, trust them to be honest with respect to the ratepayers' money. So the solution is a regional consolidation by the Sacramento state government or perhaps the U.S. Department of Interior. Do you agree with me?
Do you want to answer that? Do you agree with consolidation?
I'm here to talk about water availability. And, you know, that's what I'm aware of. And we have plenty of water, and we have the infrastructure to process it and move it around. I think if we focus on that, and we get the Soquel Creek Water District to take the water this year, this month, next month, that we will gain more people with an awareness that we have water, and then these other matters will fall into line. I think the chances of trying to have a consolidation of the water district is a very long shot. My example for this from recent times, we wanted to have a protest for the rate increase in Soquel Creek Water District. People worked very hard on that. They got 240 people to send letters in protesting the rate increase. That raised a lot of awareness, but in order to win that protest would have been required 7,501 letters. So it was more than it could be accomplished. I think we have water, we have an intertie. If we can get the people in Soquel Creek to take the water that's available and establish in the minds of the residents that we have water available, then we can begin to change the direction of the ship. That's my emphasis.
Scott, I agree with you. I think that I like to keep our eye on the ball, which is getting the aquifers filled for cheap, not for the better part of $500 million, which we can use to much better advantage for other purposes. And it seems to me that if normal methods don't work, I certainly would be willing to engage in consolidation as a next step, because I'll go as high as it takes. I mean, we're talking $500 million here, or some number of hundreds of millions of dollars, and to me, it's worth going as high as it takes until we get the right result. But I think we can play nice. I don't need to denigrate anybody. I'd rather just convince them with arguments like tonight persuasive and with the facts that the thing to do is water transfers and in lieu and just to enjoy our wonderful outcome.
I think these guys are really wise. Next question, please.
Hi, my name's Mike DeVore. I've been in the water industry myself for about 35 years. I had a question. I like the idea of doing the transfer through the intertie that's treated water, so it could go right into their distribution system. The one thing that I didn't hear, that have you guys considered, why not build another raw water line? Because you could take surface water from north. I know you can't take it from San Lorenzo River because of the water rights, but you could take it from the North Shore, and you could inject the raw water directly into their aquifers. I worked for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. We do it all the time over there, or you could do perk ponds, but it sounds like they're not very viable in that area.
The geology that you have in the Santa Clara Valley is much more conducive to perk ponds. You got a lot of them, and they work very well. But the Purissima aquifer is involved with lots of clay layers, permeable layers. So they haven't really come to the belief that they can get percolation ponds to work.
But they're talking about doing injection wells. Why couldn't you just use raw water, surface water? That's what they do over the hill.
I don't know the answer to that.
It's illegal, I'm told. And the reason why it's illegal is, raw water it's dirty, it's toxic. And at least according to the health department, who has standards.
We do it
over the hill. There's a 60-day rule or a 180-day rule, California Health Department, that says when you inject, that water has to spend that amount of time underground before it gets to the first nearest production well. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case here. There's so many production wells, both public and private, along this coastal area where the population is dense, that dirty water won't do it. It has to be treated water. Okay. And some people have even said highly treated water, like even RO or something like that. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But the thing, as I said, injection is so expensive. It's the pressure to inject and an extra well in reverse. In fact, the consultant for Soquel Creek Water District and the groundwater management agency said that in order to recharge the aquifer, the best method would not be injection, it would be in lieu, because in lieu can be spread over with many, many wells that would get shut down to whatever degrees are optimal, to just hit the right spots to keep the ocean out.
So then why couldn't they have excess capacity at the Graham Hill water treatment plant? Why couldn't they just only use the water for irrigation and stuff and just use the intertie solely where all their potable water is supplied by the city of Santa Cruz?
They kind of do that. The North Coast water is where the water rights come from that allows Santa Cruz to ship water to Soquel. But the molecules come from a mix of water from 4 sources. Some of it's North Coast, some of it's Tate Street diversion, some of it's in principal Felton, and some of it's Loch Lomond. And right now Felton is not allowed, but the Loch Lomond is. So at any rate, water from these 4 sources get mixed just ahead of the treatment plant. And it's that mix that is the actual molecules that come to Soquel. Because the mix is what's treated in the plant. And so it's potable.
Does the treatment plant have separate trains? You familiar with trains?
No, well, not that.
No, it doesn't. Not now. Well, it has 3 treatment.
Scott, you want to step to the microphone?
Yeah, when I mean trains, like
Yes, it does. It has this.
Because you could dedicate one of them to the North Shore water that could go directly over to that intertie so it keeps it separate.
Well,
I mean, we were talking about a big infrastructure thing, but it's a lot cheaper than,
We don't need to, because the mixed water goes just fine across the top. It's legal, it's clean.
Yeah.
Jared, do you want a microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's more than enough water to do it through this substitution of water to Soquel Creek customers from Santa Cruz. So injection isn't even needed.
Okay.
They can do it better with existing infrastructure, so we don't have to spend that amount of money.
Seems like it would lower their costs if they just bought all their treated water from, if they could. But laws can be changed too. It might be, it might be cheaper to try to change the laws and the water rights and then try to do all this infrastructure.
You have to want to do it, and that's what we're trying to get them to do, is want to do it, because it is cheaper.
The specific change in water rights that's being looked at is for all the water districts in the area, the middle half of the county, to allow each other to be a legal place of use. A water right says you can take water from a particular place and at a particular time, usually in 1 month chunks, and a particular amount, and the destination of that water, called place of use, has to be specified. And right now, the destination for river water in Santa Cruz is just Santa Cruz. But if the state board would allow Santa Cruz and the other agencies to allow each other to be place of use for each other's water, then that water could flow around and the water rights problem would go away.
I think
you don't need an increase in water rights, just more flexibility in place of use. And I think it's going to happen.
I think that needs to be out more in the public. It's that as a viable option to change the water rights for the distribution of the treated water. Because if people could see that alternative versus these huge capital costs, it's going to make a lot more sense. But so that should be one of the directions you'd be fighting for, to get that out to the public, that this is another option, right? Because I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, well, you have just made the evening worthwhile, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I will also say that that's exactly what the city of Santa Cruz is now reviewing environmentally, and a change in place of use. They had a public meeting in November for scoping. That's the first stage of an environmental impact report, and they are expecting the results of the draft AIR out next summer. So they are already doing that, and including Soquel Creek and Central Water District in place of use. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We could invite them to the Water Commission first Monday.
Oh, yes.
Big report.
Good evening. Make sure this doesn't fall down on me. I think my first question is partly solved by your last conversation, and what is the raw water? And is that just from the streams? Is that where, and for surface spreading, that might be where we might be refilling the wells? With
raw water simply means it hasn't been through the treatment plant.
Okay. And what happened to those water board meetings that we were going to? It just seems like they disappeared, and I haven't heard of any of them. Are they still going on? Are there any expected with City of Santa Cruz, Soquel Creek Water District, and all these other mid-coast or different folks that were around at these meetings?
I was just going to tell you about that. On the first Monday of every month.
You guys are awesome, and I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just for me, and as a layman, I just feel like, I'm very alarmed and concerned, and to have the science that backs up my concern, it just means the world to me. So I just so appreciate that. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you for hosting. On the first Monday of every month, the Santa Cruz Water Commission, which reports to the City Council, has a meeting. And this one, shortly after April Fool's Day.
It is April 1st.
Oh, on April 1st, okay. On April Fool's Day is a special one because the Water Department is going to report to the Water Commission what they're up to regarding water transfers and in particular. So if you're going to go to any meeting and speak your mind, that's one that you should.
Yeah.
That's a real good one. There's some decision makers there, and
What time?
7 o'clock, City Council chambers. You know, the downtown library in Santa Cruz
I
across
think
the
it's
street.
a different location. I think it's at the police community room. Because they're expecting a larger panel. That meeting is going to be very valuable because the members of the Water Supply Advisory Committee, WASAC that we talked about, they're all going to be present, and they're going to hear what the city has done with their recommendations. So it should be a watershed evening. I think it would, and by the time it's over, it should be clear that there's water available for water transfers, although, that's the facts. They should come out.
And also, tomorrow night is the Mid-County Groundwater Agency Board meeting at Simpkins Center. That's at 7 o'clock. 7 to 9, and that is the multiple agencies. Soquel Creek Water District, the county is there representing the county's interests. Santa Cruz City Water is there, and then they also have 3 private well representatives that are on that board, and also Central Water District is on that board. So that's tomorrow night from 7 to 9 p.m. at Simpkins Swim Center. Next Wednesday is the advisory committee for that group. That is the citizen-based, but some agencies in it too, group that is formulating this sustainable plan for healing the basin that must be submitted to the state by January of 2020. So that will be next Wednesday, 5 o'clock. They meet early and they go long, 5 o'clock till about 9, also at Simpkins Swim Center. And you can look on Mid-County Groundwater Agency website and get more information about all of that.
It's on the Water for Santa Cruz County calendar, too, right? There's a calendar in waterforsantacruz.com that can help you track all these meetings.
Do we have more questions?
A couple of things I wanted to say that.
Hop in.
All right. So I haven't been doing much homework on this, so just tell me if I need to go back and study more. So I got my bill, and it's for 7 apartments, and I had the bill down to $180 to $200 a month for 10 to 14 people. And by 2023, that bill will be approximately $400 or more, $500, to pay for this. That's what I figured out this week when I talked.
You got your math right.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I remember a long time ago somebody talking to me about the strawberry farmers and the patents at UCSC. Do you guys know anything about that? In transferring water, where is the Salinas Valley? Where are the farmers that are producing all of our agriculture? Is all that water coming from there, or are they getting something from here?
They don't get any water from us.
Okay.
It's a different aquifer. It's called the Romus Red Sands.
And it's the Salinas River and also the Pajaro River.
Okay. And then when I went into Soquel the other day, I forget why, into the water company, and I talked to the gal, and I was talking about, doing the exchange from Santa Cruz, and she said, oh, well, that's already started, but what we're really concerned about is how much they might want to charge us in the future when it's a dry year.
That's the old price question and not the cost question. That one needs to be attacked. The cost of this water is very, very low because we already have the water, we have the treatment plant, and we have pipelines to move it around. The idea that it costs a lot to make this water is wrong. The price may be somebody's idea how much they can charge for this, but the cost of the water is very low. And if extra water is produced at the Graham Hill Water Treatment Plant, Santa Cruz water price should go down, and Soquel Creek's water price
So it
should also go down.
sounds like this whole project is at least 25 years too early, right?
No,
Because,
it could have been done in the 80s.
no, I mean, it's, no, the pure water, the pure water. They're trying to do it before they even know if they need it.
Yes.
And be to a really big extent, just because it's a boondoggle. Because I went to the very first meeting, they invited me to come, and I smelled it. I said, "This smells like a boondoggle," and they looked at me.
It's a ripoff for sure.
So I didn't
by
go
the-
to any more
it's-
meetings.
It's illegal.
Yeah.
It's illegal for a water district to charge more than it costs for water transfers.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
So there's been some funny accounting in my view.
So if it's illegal and it's not substantiated by the costs, do you have any window into what drove Rosemary Menard's letter? Why would they say they were going to price gouge? Who put that bee in her bonnet?
Well, there is another factor. It's called Proposition 218. And Proposition 218 says that it was passed after water districts began using tiered rates as a conservation tool. And there were some wealthy people with large gardens that needed water, and they said it's illegal for you to charge us more than it costs to produce the water. And a law was passed called Proposition 218, which put that concept into law. So that concept says you cannot charge more than it costs, and you must charge what it costs. That's for retail customers. You can't charge one retail customer more than another retail customer. On the other hand, most water districts buy water from major water suppliers. The example that makes the most sense in our world is San Francisco, which owns Hetch Hetchy. San Francisco sells about 25% of their water to their own retail customers. They also sell water to 27 separate water districts at rates substantially below what they sell to their own customers. So it needs to be established that Soquel Creek itself, the water district, is not a retail customer. My son, who lives in Soquel Creek Water District, is a retail customer of Soquel Creek, but Soquel Creek is not a retail customer. One of the nice things that happened, because that's going to be a fight, Santa Cruz wants very much for Soquel Creek itself to be seen as a retail customer instead of a wholesale customer. In what I have learned from these attorneys I consulted was there were some changes when the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed and signed by Governor Brown 2 years ago. That is what put the Regional Groundwater Agency into existence in Santa Cruz County. There were two changes in the law, one of which says that the Regional Groundwater Basin Agency can buy water as a wholesaler and it cannot sell it as a reseller. So perhaps we can get the